Okay, here we are, everyone. Today we're going to be looking at the Four Knights. This is part of my ongoing series about the court cards. And then that's going to segue into a series of videos which I'm going to do in the course of this year, where I will take you through the entire pack. And that'll be like a resource, to anyone who wants it. So what do we have here? I'm showing you the Four Knights in Julien Paco's amazing Hidden Message Tarot, a modern tarot that I like very much. And, these are extremely charming and they're quite readable. And I think, even though the designer isn't a full-time tarotist, he's taken it quite seriously, and he's made an effort to link these modern postmodern images to what we remember from, the Rider-Waite-Smith system. Having said that, and, I like reading with these, and I use them in my graphics and so forth, and they make me look good because they are super chic. Having said that, I do need to point out that when we are going into, the meanings of the cards in the RWS system in detail, we're going to have to draw in the Pamela images. So here, Julien Paco he's done a surrealist knight here sitting on a tree, and he's retained the body language. But for our in-depth discussion of the Four Knights, we're going to have to go with the Pam images. Okay, so here they are in a venerable old 1980s deck that I've been reading with for years, and which is, the cards are soft with the grease of many fingers, ladies and gentlemen. Let's start with the Knight of Wands. Now, the Knight of Wands is fire of fire. Knights are considered to be fire, and wands are considered to be fire. So he's the fire of fire, the fieriest person in the whole deck. What I like about the way Pamela drew the Knights is that she's not super reverent. I think with the Knight of Wands and the Knight of Swords, you can feel almost like a critique of the energy that's going on here. I mean, I don't think there are some, put it this way, there are some feminist tarotists who are critical of these male archetypes as such, like, there is something wrong with the King of Cups. I think that's a bit much. I think these types are almost beyond gender. And you can, if you like, you can have a female King of Cups, if that's the way you want to correct the gender slant. But what I want to say is that there's a certain kind of irreverence in some of Pamela's sketches, I think, of the Knights. And now Pamela was working with A.E. Waite sort of breathing down her neck, at least certainly for the major arcana. I think he kind of got a bit bored after the majors, and when she was doing the minors and the court cards, he sort of went off and did something else, went and mixed himself a whiskey and left her to do all the hard work. And so she got away with quite a lot. I think it's very much her deck, and she got away with quite a lot of individual comment in these cards. Okay, Knight of Wands and Knight of Swords. They verge on the edge of parody. They verge on the edge of being comedic figures. But let's look at it. Let's not go too deeply into that. This is the fieriest card, and he's I think he expresses fire sign symbols sort of gone raving mad. In other words, Leo, Aries, Sagittarius, the guy's on fire. And it's not just that she's used oranges and that she's made these plumes look like flames. She's got the horse at 45 degrees. Now, These people were Victorians and Edwardians, but behind closed doors in the magical societies, they talked about sex and sexuality, and they talked about the knight's horses. They knew very well that this was a phallic symbol, and that the horse represented the kind of like the power that the knight was riding. This is why when you do a modern deck, you have to have the knight riding something, horse, motorbike, bus. It's no good if he's just walking along the road. This is someone who has a source of power. So here we have, the phallic symbol at 45 degrees. It's erect, basically. And so he's absolutely, what's the word? He's absolutely on heat, if a male archetype can be on heat. I actually also think that the hind quarters of the horse look rather strange and look a bit like the hindquarters of a lion, actually. See what I mean? That's what I get from that. The other remarkable thing about the Knight of Wands is that, he is not in Sussex, is he, anymore? A lot of Pamela's stuff is in this idyllic English countryside. It's quite safe, isn't it? A lot of it. It's quite green. It's England's green and pleasant land. But the Pentacles, I think, they have strayed out of England's pleasant land, and I think that's because they are explorers. The Pentacle family, they are clearly the land symbolises heat. We've got pyramids there, but it's more than that. They're far from home. They've struck out. They are looking for their kingdom. They're looking for an arena in which to operate. They're looking for fields of enterprise. I'm interested in traditional meanings of tarot cards. And what I like about the RWS is that Pamela, with A.E. Waite's help, she ran with a selection of traditional meanings. They had their files in front of them, their collected traditional meanings, and they looked at them and they tried to synthesize them into something. And a lot of the solutions that she found were very brilliant. Now, Knight of Wands traditionally symbolizes departure, in the sense that Knight of Cups traditionally symbolizes arrival. So this guy is departing. He's setting off. It's the beginning of a journey. He's leaving home in order to find his fame and fortune. He may be looking for excitement. He may be looking for profit. He may be looking for adventure. He may be looking for a partner. He may be looking for sex. But the Knight of Wands does symbolize departure. And in that respect, he might be someone who leaves people behind. It's quite a good energy to find in a reading, because the Knight of Wands is the sort of person who gets on with things. He or she, and by the way, when I'm talking about an illustration, I tend to refer to the gender of the illustration, but of course the energy we're referring to is always beyond gender. He or she is someone who really gets up in the morning and maybe has a strong cup of coffee and then gets on with their agenda. The Knight of Wands is fairly unstoppable. Okay, next up, Knight of Cups. Before I talk about Knight of Cups, I just want to point out something rather fascinating about the traditions of the tarot. If we look at a tarot suit, cups, clearly there are 4 characters. In the playing cards, which are much older than tarot, there are 3 characters. And the thing is that it's the knight that is the edition, that is the Renaissance edition. In the old pack, which is maybe from 1100, you have 3 cards. You have a queen. Well, it varies in what they're called, but most of the time you have a queen, a king, and a knave. And what happened was, in the Renaissance, they made the tarot and they added the knight. Looking back on the original family of three, if this guy was originally called a knave, he wasn't a page. And a knave is not quite the same thing as a page. A page is a young, usually pre-pubescent boy who, he comes from a noble family and he's given the job of looking after a lady. So he needs to be prepubescent. You can't have a young man, handing a lady her underwear. So these are young boys, and then they graduate from being a page to being a squire, and they look after a knight, and then if they're lucky, they become a knight themselves, and they gradually, take their place in the court. But before that, they were knaves, and a knave really is more of a kind of like a youngish serving guy, and knaves were a bit more potent than pages. I mean, they weren't little boys. Okay, so the original pack of playing cards has mythological associations, and in my first two videos on the kings and the queens, I've talked about this a little bit, like, the King of Cups was traditionally associated with Charlemagne. The Queen of Cups, rather amazingly, was traditionally associated with the biblical Judith, who seduced and decapitated the enemy general Holofernes. So she has tricks up her sleeves. And the original Page of Cups, also very interesting. He wasn't a page, was he, in those days? He was a knave. He was originally associated with Paris of Troy, the handsome prince who stole Helen of Troy and, started a whole war and caused absolute catastrophe. And so he has a lot of subtext behind him. And this is not a little boy. This is a young, potent, maybe beautiful man. So when the knights came in later, actually, frankly, they didn't have these very old mythical associations with them. So the knights are free of mythological associations. I thought you might like to know that. And you can read more about this stuff in the books of Paul Huson, who is a very, very good tarot writer. So you probably know a little bit about the Knight of Cups. People think he's the Jack of Hearts. He's actually not the Jack of Hearts, but he has this rather ooh-la-la romantic feeling to him. Now, just as the Knight of Battens is associated with departure, the Knight of Cups is associated with arrival. This is someone who is ambling onto the scene, ambling into our lives. He holds a cup. A cup is a symbol of the emotional life, the life of the heart. This might be someone with a proposal. Originally, he was a messenger who came to pay off a debt. He's definitely brought something with him. We could leave it there, and in most readings we will leave it there. We'll say that the Knight of Cups is, a romantic figure. But for more advanced tarot readers in my audience, I just want to show you this. Now that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Look at those two figures. The Knight of Cups is a sort of imprint of the Death card. The horses are in almost exactly the same pose. The figures are in very much the same pose. They're both holding something. He's holding the cup, maybe of love, and he's holding this black rose. It's a rose, but it's black. This is a very difficult, challenging card, isn't it? We're all challenged by death as an idea. It may be fine, there's the sun here, but it may not be. Now, the Knight of Cups is traditionally associated, he's from a watery suit, cups. So he's associated with the three watery astrological signs. We have Cancer, we have Scorpio, and we have Pisces. Knight of Cups is particularly associated with Scorpio, and Scorpio is associated with death. So if we want to go into the really deeper meaning of the Knight of Cups, I think this is a card which draws our attention in some way to the connection between love and death, the connection between sex and death. Make of that what you will. Death is a transformation. Death is change. Love changes everything. I think what's wonderful about tarot and maybe about all esoteric studies is that they do encourage us to be less fearful about existence and to look at the difficult things, to look at the difficult questions, and just look at them in a slightly more intuitive and magical way. So yes, I think if you want to put a slight spin on the Knight of Cups, this is a romantic figure, but not necessarily an entirely trustworthy one. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a look at the Knight of Swords. This, for me, is the second Pamela Knight, who has a slightly parodic feel. Let me show you what I mean. I find that horse slightly funny, and I don't think with Pamela it's a mistake. I think she's too brilliant for that. Now, the Knight of Swords is Knight, Fire, Swords, Air. So he's the fire of air. He's fire and air, the fiery part of air. So you could say he's hot air. The Knight of Swords is someone who's actually looking for an argument. He's looking for a fight. He's dashing ahead, isn't he? And, you know, these jagged skies, we see jagged skies in the Five of Swords as well. And they do suggest, you know, the disruption of one's world. We see the wind bending the trees here. And we see he's flying like the wind, isn't he? I think he's kind of like, he's argue now and think about it later. And that's what I meant about the parodic thing is I'm not quite sure whether Pamela thought that was a particularly constructive energy. Her collaborator, A.E. Waite, was of the opinion that the Knight of Swords symbolized the energy of pure intellect. And, you know, pure intellect in the Victorian age was, to some extent, it had a better reputation than it now has. I think in our century we're aware that pure intellect is maybe an unbalanced thing. It has to be balanced by at least by an awareness of physicality and maybe, you know, intuition and maybe emotion, sort of emotional intelligence as well. But in those days there were still people who thought that pure intellect was going to save the world. And I think it may be that A.E. Waite thought the Knight of Swords was going to save the world, and Pamela privately didn't. So I read this card as someone who, as I say, is looking for a debate, loves to debate, is looking for a fight and loves to fight. And as an energy, the appearance of this card may symbolize the approach of battles. As a person, this person can be a good ally, that the Knight of Swords is loyal, and the Knight of Swords will defend his or her friends. But, you know, if we're going to look at the deeper correspondences of this card, well, the Golden Dawn linked this card with the 5 and the 6 of Swords, battle and the flight from battle. That there is the feeling of endless battles and partial victories which probably aren't getting anyone anywhere. This card was traditionally always associated with the military, with warriors. I think in our current age we could use the word warrior of this person, but it's not necessarily someone with a gun. I mean, just have a think about what the word warrior means to you and see what that suggests. And I think if you're looking for the negative side of this card, then there is a certain sort of pig-headedness, even a stupidity. I mean, the Knight of Swords is usually very clever, but if the energy is going wrong, then this cleverness can flip into a certain kind of stupidity, I think. And lastly, I'd like to say that the Knight of Swords has butterflies here on his horse's, well, there must be a word for that thing, on his horse's outfit. And I think that suggests that, these battles and these arguments, which are so important to the Knight of Swords, well, they're a bit transient, aren't they? They're like butterflies. These controversies, they're so important today, and then they live for a day, don't they? And then the next day, they're kind of gone. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, last but by no means least, I actually like the Knight of Pentacles very much. He's one of my favourite cards in the deck, and I think that when I was young, I used to think that Pentacles were maybe not such a glamorous sign as the others. We have the other signs rushing around, looking for adventure, looking for love, looking for battles, and then we have the Knight of Pentacles, which is just there, really, just fixing things and changing the light bulbs. Let me show you what I mean. The Knight of Pentacles is the one knight, I think, who is still. The Knight of Battens, as we have seen, is departing. He's setting off for an adventure. The Knight of Cups is arriving. He's arriving for an adventure of some sort. The Knight of Swords is galloping across the land looking for fights. And the Knight of Pentacles, his talent is actually for staying put, for being present. And that's quite a talent. I mean, especially in a love reading, who wants an absent lover? Who wants a lover who departs? Who wants, who wants this very, very ambiguous and highly romantic but complicated figure, and who wants someone who is perhaps very, very, very strong and able to defend you, but is expending a lot of energy fighting? No, the Knight of Pentacles is really present. Look at the horse. Look at how solid the horse is, and how the horse's hooves are solidly on the ground, all four of them. And this, well, the heaviness of the horse, the blackness of the horse, and the slightly reverent expression on his face. I think Yolanda Robinson says something very nice about this card, that the two of them, the rider, the knight and the horse, seem to be aware of the seriousness of their job. They are alert, and they're present, and they're ready to help. They're ready to support you. They are ready to defend you. Aleister Crowley, the crazy Aleister Crowley, as I've said in one of my previous videos, he imagined environments that corresponded with each of the court cards. And he did that elementally. So he would take the two elements in particular court card and look for an environment that suggested. So here we have the Knight of Pentacles, the fire of earth. For Crowley, the fiery part of the earth was a mountain. And I think maybe he was laterally thinking about mountains that may once have been volcanoes, but that's how he got there. And I think a mountain is a very lovely symbol for the Knight of Pentacles. It's solid, it's immovable, it's a place of refuge. And there's also something quite inspiring about a mountain. You can go up into a mountain and be inspired and come down with your holy book, whatever it is, having had dreams and visions. Traditionally people think that the Knight of Pentacles is something like a policeman or a taxi driver or a bouncer outside a nightclub. But I think it's more interesting to say that he is someone who keeps the system going. He's not looking for new ways of fighting adventure. He's not looking for new romances. He's not looking for new battles to fight. He is looking at where he is and seeing what it needs. He's not an inventor, he's a maintainer. And actually, people like that are really good to have around. He's very loyal, and he is very aware that people need help. He's very aware that people need to be looked after. He's very connected with the land. He can help us to connect with the earth, with Mother Nature. You know, for me, what's not to like? Fantastic. And before I finish my video about the 4 nights, I would just like to propose something which I've noticed about them. And I think this is an original idea that I've had. I don't think I read it in any book, which is that these 4 nights, you could say that they symbolize the 4 stages of love, or the 4 stages of partnership, romantic partnership. Because look, here we have Knight of Wands. That's sort of pursuit, isn't it? Pursuing or looking for, or cruising, you could almost say in gay parlance, you know, putting yourself about, looking for the possible partner. Knight of Cups, seduction, sex, it definitely symbolizes sex. Knight of Swords, conflict. Maybe, if you're lucky, conflict resolution, but certainly conflict. And the Knight of Pentacles, commitment. Staying there, staying with it, and looking after the other person. So that's my theory of the 4 nights, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed this video. You've been watching The Hands of Robert Farrar, also known as Tian Tara. And I've got the devil in me slightly this year. I'm thinking of releasing 1 video a week. Let's see if it kills me. So let's say see you next week. We shall see. And stay well till then. Bye.